Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Cavanaugh Grant with the University of Illinois Extension, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Jim Riddle. And many of you already know Jim, but I'd like to share some of things about him. Over the past 30 years, Jim Riddle has been an organic farmer, gardener, inspector, educator, policy analyst, author, activist, and avid organic eater. Jim was founding chair of the Winona Farmers Market Association and the International Organic Inspectors Association. He's also the co-author of the IFOAM/IOIA inspection manual. Jim served on the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's Organic Advisory Task Force from 1991 to 2009. And he was instrumental in the passage of Minnesota's landmark organic certification cost share program. Jim currently works as Organic Outreach Coordinator for the University of Minnesota and is the elected chair of the Winona County Soil and Water Conservation District Board. Jim is former chair of the USDA's National Organic Standards Board and a leading voice for local food systems, soil and water conservation, and organic agriculture. So Jim, we'd like to welcome you to Illinois.
Well, thanks so much, Deborah, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I remember speaking at the Illinois Organic Conference, I think it was 2003, and that was, I think, the first year, and the thing that was very similar was there was also a snowstorm. But it's great, and it's an honor to be back here in Illinois, and I'd like to also welcome all of the people who've logged in to the eOrganic webinar. The program said this talk was titled, What is Organic Food and Why Should I Care? But I have shortened that to Why Eat Organic? And as I get older, I try to be more concise, so you'll get to hear 1 hour of me being concise. So good luck with that. I'll be talking about organic, and that is in the context of the USDA organic regulation, and which has been on the books since 1990, but was fully implemented in 2002. And compared to other eco claims that are made, natural, sustainable, local, this and that, this is actually defined in federal regulation, and there have been people prosecuted, fined, and actually gone to jail for violating organic standards. So I'm going to just review a little bit what this claim means before I get into summaries of various research findings. This is from the USDA Organic Program website. There are different label claims. We're all eaters. We all shop. And when you see that word organic, it can mean different things under the law. So if a product is labeled 100% organic, it means just that. Everything in it, including any processing aids, were 100% certified organic ingredients, agricultural products. But much more common is the claim organic in the marketplace. And that means that at least 95% of the content is certified organic. The remaining 5% has to be on this approved national list, which is part of the national regulation and is controlled by the Citizen Advisory Board, the National Organic Standards Board. Both of those claims can carry this USDA organic logo. The next claim that you'll find in the marketplace on the front of a product is called Made with Organic Ingredients, where it says what those ingredients are. It has to have at least 70% organic content, but it cannot carry that USDA organic logo. So that's a major difference there. And then products can also contain organic ingredients in a smaller percentage, but that they can't make a front panel claim, but it can be listed in the ingredient statement on the back of a product. So those are just the various label categories, but this is really what it's all about. This is the legal definition of organic production that's in the regulation, that it's a production system, so it's a systems approach to agriculture, managed to respond to site-specific conditions by integrating cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster the cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. So you see, this is a very holistic, an ecological system of agriculture that's defined in federal statute, federal regulation. I just wish the tax code and all the other federal regulations were this enlightened and visionary. But this is truly an ecological standard that then must be, carried out by the farmers, the processors, everybody involved in the chain. But really, the principle that it is based on is that a healthy soil produces healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy people, and a healthy planet. And that is the overall concept captured in that regulation that this is based on. And this is just a graphic from the Soil Biology Primer, which came out from the Soil and Water Conservation Society and the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service in 2000, and remains the best simple booklet explaining the biology, the ecology of the soil. But the soil is a living ecosystem, and organic, as I said, is based on feeding the soil rather than just feeding the crops an NPK type fertilizer that's just designed to feed the crops. Instead, organic farmers work under cover crops, green manures, compost, manure, animal manures, all to feed those soil organisms that then make those nutrients available to the crops. And we'll see some of the results of that approach. Here's research, and I just, before I get into various peer-reviewed, I didn't touch that, literature, I just want to say that, as with any research, the studies that I'll be citing, give a snapshot. Nothing is absolutely conclusive, but these studies reveal trends that we're learning about the benefits of the organic approach, the organic system. So here from Iowa State University, looking at organic and conventional, same soil types, and showing that the organic yields rose above the conventional after 4 years in an organic rotation. That's the corn and soybean yields. And the researchers attributed that improvements to improvements in soil quality, higher levels of soil organic matter, increased microbial activity, more diverse communities of organisms, and reduced soil acidity. And at the bottom I have the link to Iowa State Extension organic research reports, and they have numerous research reports, and throughout I will have either the citations or the links to the direct studies, and the web version of this is set up with hyperlinks so that you can click on those for more information. So here's similar research out of the USDA Ag Research Service lab in Beltsville, Maryland, and a 10-year study, and showing that the organic farming system using cover crops and manure built up the soil better than a conventional no-till system. Even with limited tillage in the system, those losses that happened were offset by the additions from the cover crops and the manure. And then another researcher there also showed that the corn yields were higher in the diverse organic rotations that include a perennial legume like alfalfa. Okay. As I'm sure you've heard, there are hypoxia zones or dead zones at the mouth of major rivers, and it's not just the Mississippi River, but this picture shows the Mississippi as it passes through New Orleans. But those dead zones are caused largely by the excess nutrients, the pesticides, and the sediments from upstream practices, and certainly not just from agriculture, but anything that goes down the river then impacts life at the other end. And that's something that in the upper Midwest, we need to, in all systems of agriculture, pay more attention and retain nutrients, retain those toxins. Well, organic farmers are not using the toxic pesticides or synthetic fertilizers, and that does help protect both ground and surface water from those contaminants. This is my wife. We like to go fishing when we have a little extra time, and this was actually Father's Day last year, a fish she caught on Father's Day. I didn't have such luck, but it's 23-inch bass. But a fish like that we would never keep and butcher because of the high level of contaminants, the pesticide residues, and the heavy metals. As well, it's a good breeding stock to put back. But this is in the backwaters of the Mississippi. I live near Winona, Minnesota, near La Crosse, so upriver a bit. But here's some research from the University of Minnesota confirming some of the things I was just saying. That and here this is looking at the leachate in drainage tile under side-by-side plots of organic and conventional managed soils in southwest Minnesota. First, showing, boy, this is incredibly sensitive. Okay. Okay. All right. Hold. Maybe I need to settle down. Okay. That the higher levels of organic matter in the organic managed soils act as a sponge capturing that soil moisture. So there was 41% less water being lost from the organic soil showing up in the drain tiles to begin with. So capturing more soil moisture, and then the water that was found in those tile lines had about 60% less nitrates. So less water and then less pollutants in the water. So confirming the things I talked about right there. It sure likes to show that picture. Okay, well here's similar research from Washington State University, only looking at organic and conventional orchards, and finding that the nitrate leaching was about 5 times higher in the conventional orchard plots, and found that the organic soils exhibited higher denitrification rates, denitrification efficiency, higher levels of organic matter, and greater microbial activity than conventional soils. And that same effect then helps kind of drought-proof soils because you're retaining that water in the soil organic matter like a sponge. And here's research from Rodale Institute. Over 21 years, there were 6 drought years, and in side-by-side organic and conventional treatments, finding that the organic yields were significantly higher in 5 out of those 6 drought years. In the 6th drought year, it was so bad that there wasn't yields anywhere. I guess I was ready to move. Boy, not that fast though. Organic farmers, well, just a few slides about genetic engineering. As many of you know, since about the mid-1990s, there have been numerous GMOs approved by the federal government, but none of the products of genetic engineering need to be labeled as such. They do in numerous other countries, in all of Europe, Korea, Japan, etc., but not in the United States. And there haven't been human health studies or very many environmental studies prior to the approval of these products. So for people wanting to avoid GMOs, really the only label out there that consistently prohibits the use of GMOs is the organic label. The GMO products are not required to be labeled themselves. So that's a major concern. But research is showing there are other concerns coming to light now. The Roundup Ready canola, which is grown in the Great Plains, North Dakota, for instance, finding that canola, there are numerous mustards that cross-pollinate, and finding that the canola is cross-pollinating and creating novel species of closely related mustards that are resistant to herbicides. That wasn't anticipated or predicted in the approval process or even really examined. Here, this is research now coming out in the last few years on the Bt toxin that is the toxic genes extracted from a soil bacterium and inserted into the corn plants. And so these toxic genes are present in every cell of that corn. So in the corn kernel itself, but also in the stalks, in the pollen, in the crop residues. And here's research out of Notre Dame, Loyola, Indiana, and Southern Illinois universities finding that those Bt toxins, the genetically engineered proteins, are widely distributed and persistent in streams in the Corn Belt and remain biologically active at least 6 months after harvest of the crop in the water, in the streams and ditches. Well, what are they doing there? Well, there is research out on that from Indiana University finding that those Bt toxins are harmful to aquatic insects and disrupt the stream ecosystems, and specifically the caddisfly larvae that were studied showed high mortality and stunted growth when exposed to the Bt corn pollen and crop residues. And if you're a trout fisherman or know anything about stream ecology, the caddisfly is kind of a cornerstone species. Many other higher trophic levels consume caddisflies and caddisfly larvae in the ecosystems. Once again, this was not anticipated, this was not researched prior to the approval of these novel organisms that have never been part of the ecosystem or part of the human diet prior to the mid-1990s. Well, now, just in the last year, we're finding reports, these confirmed by university researchers in Iowa State, but also in Illinois and Minnesota, that the corn rootworm has developed resistance to the Bt hybrids that have been genetically altered specifically to kill corn rootworms. Well, always the insects adapt, and a few survive. They're the ones who breed, and now there are Bt-resistant corn rootworm populations throughout the Midwest. And the irony here is, for an organic farmer, if you have a soil-building crop rotation that includes, and you want to grow corn, but to be organic, you have to have a soil-building rotation. So you're going to have oats, you're going to have alfalfa, you're going to have soybeans. If you have a diverse rotation, you don't have a problem with corn rootworm to begin with. When you have a problem with corn rootworm, it's when you grow corn on corn on corn and maybe a little beans, and then corn and corn and beans and corn. That's when you have a problem with the corn rootworm. So it's a problem that really is a result of the monocropping systems, which are not part of the organic. Well, there certainly has been concern about the impact of GMOs on various butterfly species, but here research looking into the monarchs and not focusing on the Bt toxin, but rather the widespread adoption of Roundup Ready crops has really wiped out the milkweed, which is the natural food source, exclusive food source for monarch, and there have been tremendous declines in the populations of monarchs documented now in the last 10 years. And at the same time, we have nearly 20 weed species that are glyphosate resistant, and specifically some of the big ones are horseweed, water hemp, and giant ragweed in Illinois and Iowa. And the weed scientists, as quoted in Weed Science magazine, are recommending applications of atrazine, simazine, 2,4-D, and other herbicides in addition to glyphosate to solve this problem. And now there's a application open for public comment for a new variety of soybeans that has been genetically modified to withstand multiple applications of 2,4-D. And that's open for public comment right now. So this is like layering one problem on top of another problem as a solution. Okay, now this, speaking of layering, the layout switched here. but the U.S. Geological Survey has tracked pesticide levels in rainwater and finding that during the spring and summer months when pesticides are being applied, that the rain itself is consistently more than 100% over the safe drinking water limit for atrazine and allichlor. So this is rain that's falling on every farm, and this is one reason why organic cannot be a residue-free claim, because we grow our crops on the same planet as everyone else, where the rainwater does contain multiple pesticides. And here, this picture was taken in Illinois. It was a number of years ago, and it was not an organic farm. I was out doing inspections, and it was so windy, I was having trouble keeping my car in the lane, and here someone was out applying pesticides, and whoever was paying for it wasn't getting their money's worth. You can see that this is going right up into the clouds. But those things are not allowed in the organic system. And there's quite a few studies now showing that organic foods consistently have lower or no levels of pesticide residues. And when I used to do inspections, I did them for about 20 years, I'd always ask people, why are you going organic, or why did you switch? And there's all kinds of reasons, no right reason, it's just making conversation. But by far, the most common answer would be to protect my family from pesticide exposures. And one farmer really put it succinctly or touching when he explained how, he'd farmed conventionally, but he'd gone through the pesticide applicator training, and you're supposed to triple wash your clothes, wear the protective clothing and all this. And he said, I just want to be able to get off the tractor and hug my kids. I want to be able to come in the house and not be, toxic to my own family. And that certainly, strikes home. But here, looking at the pesticide residue levels in foods, 3 different data sets here. USDA's own pesticide detection program, finding that conventional crops 6 times as likely as organic to contain multiple pesticide residues. Similar results from California Department of Health, and only there with multiple residues, the conventional is 9 times higher. And Consumers Union has done similar reports, and this was a paper published in May of 2002 looking at all these data sets. But these trends have continued, and it only makes sense. But this is a very interesting study out of the University of Washington looking at organophosphate metabolite residues in the urine of 5-year-old children. There were 23 children in this study, and just fed a regular conventional diet, and then switched over to an organic diet, and then switched back to a conventional food diet. And these weren't farm worker kids, these were suburban kids in Seattle. All 23 children during the first phase had metabolites of organophosphate insecticides in their urine. When they were switched to an organic diet, after just 5 days, all of the children's urine dropped to 0 or below detectable levels. When they were switched back, those levels went right back up. And the researchers concluded consuming food grown using organic methods can virtually eliminate exposure to a dangerous class of insecticides known to disrupt neurological development in infants and children. And here, just last year, 3 studies funded by the National Institutes of Health confirmed these same findings. Here, looking at then what were the health impacts of those exposures. These studies finding that exposure to common pesticides more likely to experience problems with cognitive development, lower IQs, impaired memory and reasoning, and these were from a diverse ethnic backgrounds, both rural and urban. Very interesting findings there. And President's Cancer Panel report, it just came out last year. It was 2010 was the date on it, though. but that urged consumers to choose foods grown without pesticides or chemical fertilizers, antibiotics, growth hormones to help decrease the risk of contracting cancer. Exposure to pesticides can be decreased by choosing, to the extent possible, foods grown without pesticides or chemical fertilizers. Exposure to antibiotics, growth hormones, and toxic runoff from livestock can be minimized by eating meat raised without these medications. Those were the findings. And this was a cancer panel that was originally seated under the Bush administration. So you can't just say, oh, this is Obama or something like that. It was a bipartisan group of scientists looking at ways to reduce cancer in the population, and these were their findings. Well, it mentioned livestock, so let's talk a little bit about livestock. Under the organic label, for any livestock products to be labeled as organic, whether it's meat or milk, the animals must be fed 100% organic diet. I didn't quite meet that with my two daughters, but anyway, livestock are getting a better diet there. So any of the agricultural components in the diet must be organic for the products to be labeled as such. And then if it's from ruminant animals, there's been a recent change to the regulation requiring that grazing animals be on pasture at least 120 days during the grazing season and get at least 30% of their nutrients from grazing. So what are the impacts of grazing systems? Well, there's numerous studies that have shown that meat and milk from grazing animals have higher levels of healthy amino acids, the CLAs, conjugated linoleic acids, that these have anti-diabetic, anti-mutagenic, anti-carcinogenic, and anti-atherosclerotic effects on human health. And this research out of Germany showing that the organic milk had higher levels of the CLAs, beta-carotene, and tocopherols, and that also was true for the cream as well. But this study from Great Britain went a step further and looked at women consuming mostly organic meat and milk products and found that the level of CLAs in their breast milk was over 50% higher. So it's not just the impact on the original consumer, but those are passing through the mother in the breast milk that's going to their infant children, and attributing that to the higher levels of pasture forage in the diets of the organic animals. But it needs to taste good, and that's what I'm all about, is good taste. I may not show today in this show, but anyway, taste and nutrition. Well, what are we finding? What's the research revealing? What are the trends here? This is a very interesting study from the University of California, Davis, looking at the level of flavonoids in organic and conventional tomatoes. A 10-year study, side by side, showing that two of the flavonoids they were looking at, quercetin and camphorol, were 79 and 97% higher in the organic tomatoes. But what's really interesting is when that's graphed out, that they started off similar, but over time, the level of the bioflavonoids under the organic treatment just continued to increase, whereas the conventional tomatoes, being given just a simple fertilizer, NPK, it just remained flat. But as you build the soil biology, the soil organic matter, that's reflected in higher levels of bioflavonoids in the tomato. Well, how about potatoes? I love to grow potatoes. These are right in my garden, digging some early potatoes. Well, here, research from 2005 showed lower nitrate levels, higher vitamin C, and elevated concentrations of glucoalkaloids in potatoes grown in the organic system. Grapefruit, organic grapefruit having higher levels of ascorbic acid, health-promoting bioflavonoids once again, sugars, lower levels of nitrates, also had thinner, more yellow peels, and more higher levels of specific gravity. And this is out of Texas, published in 2007. Antioxidants, looking at pears and peaches, an increase in the total polyphenol content in the organic peaches and pears, higher levels of sorbic and citric acids, and tocopherol levels were higher in the pears, and those resulting from the organic practices. Blueberries, my wife and I have been putting in about 4 acres of blueberries and other perennial fruits in the last few years, so I wanted to see what research is showing on blueberries, and finding, and this is once again in the same soil, same climate in New Jersey, and the same variety of blueberries, that the organic blueberries, higher sugar content, higher levels of malic acid, total phenolics, anthocyanins, and antioxidants in the organic fruit. And tomato juice, some research from Spain showing that even after processing, that the organic tomato juice had higher levels of antioxidants. And since I'm from Minnesota, I should have stopped for a word from the Ketchup Advisory Board for any of you who listen to Prairie Home Companion. It even carries over to ketchup. A study showing, this is USDA research, that the organic brands of ketchup had about 60% higher levels of antioxidants than 6 national brands of conventional ketchup. And wine. We can't live by ketchup alone. So how about wine? Well, here's some research published in the Journal of Wine Research. 15 varieties of red wine, finding that the organic wine had higher concentrations of antioxidants and total polyphenols and lower levels of mycotoxins, and attributing the lower levels of mycotoxins to the use of the organic practices, the healthy ecosystem. So I'll drink to that, but not yet. Back to livestock. Well, part of the organic standards require that all organic animals have access to the outdoors. How much is debatable, and that is an ongoing issue. Not all poultry operations have such a nice yard for their birds. These are turkeys in this slide. But the standards do require access to outdoors. And that raises fear that those animals, those birds, are going to be exposed to more pathogens, and so might have higher levels of salmonella, for instance. Well, the research doesn't confirm that fear. The research actually shows, and this is from Great Britain, looking at conventional confinement poultry operations and organic operations with outdoor access, finding much higher levels, 23.4% salmonella found on the conventional caged hens versus about 5% in the free-range organic birds. And some similar results from the University of Georgia published just in 2010. 40% of the conventional chickens were positive for salmonella, while only 5.6% of the organic birds were infected. That doesn't mean we don't have anything to worry about. We certainly do in the organic sector. And just a few months ago, there was an organic poultry producer in Minnesota who had to recall eggs because of salmonella. And so every producer, whether they're conventional or organic, still has to practice good hygiene, good animal husbandry, rodent prevention, etc., to help prevent salmonella in their flocks. But here, this University of Georgia research showed that the feed itself on the conventional side was much more likely to be contaminated. And what, once again, is really interesting findings showing that the salmonella that was found in those conventional flocks, about 40% of it was resistant to 6 antibiotics. So the whole issue of antibiotic-resistant bacteria is huge. And the antibiotics can't be given to the organic birds, and 0% of the isolates from the organic birds showed any antibiotic resistance. So very interesting findings there. And that's a growing concern in the whole healthcare and public health arena. Well, this is similar results from Ohio State University, but looking at Campylobacter versus salmonella. But here, less than 2% of the Campylobacter strains from organic broilers and turkeys were resistant to this class fluoroquinolones of antibiotic, whereas 46% of the broilers and 67% of the isolates from turkeys, conventional turkeys, were resistant, of the Campylobacter isolates were resistant to fluoroquinolones. Well, just a note here that the cloning of animals and the use of transgenics, the breeding of things that could never breed in nature, the transfer of genes from one species to another, those things are not allowed in organic livestock. Cloning has been deregulated by FDA, but once again, the products of cloned animals are not required to be labeled. This is not a cloned calf. This is a nice organic Jersey calf on an Amish farm that I did trick photography. So I don't want to impugn on this nice calf. But just a reminder that cloning is not allowed in the organic system if that's something that concerns you as well. Organic farmers, as I read in the very definition of organic production, must improve or maintain, enhance the biodiversity on their operations. And that includes providing habitat and food sources for pollinators. And this slide I just like to show, Rock Spring Farm in far northeast Iowa. You just see the diversity of colors of plants, of nectar sources there on that operation. And research out of Europe has shown that at every level of the food chain, from bacteria to mammals, organic farming increases biodiversity. And that was a literature review of published literature from Europe, Canada, New Zealand, and the U.S. All around the world, and finding consistent increases in biodiversity everywhere, from the soil ecology that I began speaking about to the insects, birds, mammals on organic farms. Well, just a few numbers for you. Under the 2007 Ag Census, it was the first time they ever asked questions about organic farming. And that census found about 20,000 organic farms in the U.S. managing about 2.5 million organic acres with an average sale of about $93,000. So not small potatoes, not just backyard gardeners. And there will be a new organic ag census underway right now, getting more details about organic farmers. But in 2007, the average age of all farmers in the U.S. was 57.1 years. The average age of organic farmers was 53.2 years. So I like to say we now have statistical proof that organic farming makes you younger. I'm somewhere in between, getting closer to that upper number, I hate to say. But anyway, the point is, joking aside, that there are many young people who are entering organic production. I see it here in the audience today. I see it at the Moses Conference at the end of February up in La Crosse. Many young people optimistic with their children, child care provided at the conferences, entering this system of agriculture, and that is a very hopeful sign. Well, we have to look at the big picture and impact of agriculture on carbon sequestration. And research shows that organic systems with the use of cover crops, the diverse crop rotations I spoke about, and the use of animal manure are excellent at sequestering carbon. Here's research from the Rodale Institute, 25 years of data. The two upper lines show the soil carbon levels under organic management, one using animal manure and the other using legumes. So continually rising over time. And that graph actually goes further now because they've continued the research. The bottom line is side-by-side plots with conventional fertilizer applications and essentially holding level, not building soil carbon levels, and certainly nowhere near what the organic system is doing. Well, here's a report from the United Nations and the World Trade Organization looking at organic agriculture and climate change. and summarizing that organic agriculture has much to offer in both mitigation of climate change through its emphasis on closed nutrient cycles and carbon sequestration, etc., like I just spoke of, and is particularly resilient and productive system for adapting to changing climates. Because we don't have all our eggs in just one crop, but we have diverse cropping systems, we're more resilient and able to adapt to changes. Okay, but how do we feed the world? That's always a question we get faced with, and I mean, if we're really concerned about feeding the world, why are we feeding 1/3 of the U.S. corn crop to our cars in the form of ethanol? Just a question. But anyway, you know, world food security has a lot more to do with economics, political stability, storage, distribution, than it does just productivity or yield per acre. But even looking just at yield, here's a study published in 2007 looking at 293 other yield studies and finding that even in temperate climates, the systems are comparable. In tropical ecosystems, that the use of nitrogen cover crops has significant increases in crop yields and food security. And that was also the findings of another United Nations report showing that by adopting organic practices in developing regions, yields could be increased up to 180%. Organic agriculture offers advantages in terms of enhancing food production where it is most needed by decreasing dependence on external inputs and increasing agro-ecosystem performance. And there's links to two different United Nations reports, one from 2007 and one from just last year, on food security and organic agriculture or agro-eco agriculture. So, just a reminder to close that we're all part of the web of life. This is some raspberries in our patch that my wife didn't want to pick because she didn't want to get close to the spider, but spiders have a very important role in the ecosystem as a predator. And I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here with me today. And thank you for joining me on the eOrganic webinar. So.